Okay, so a Super Bowl halftime show kicks off this huge backlash. But according to the source we're breaking down today, this wasn't just some random controversy. It was a calculated battle for viewers. Let's get into it. Right off the bat, the source we're explaining today makes this pretty dramatic claim. It's not just that people were channel surfing. The argument here is that this was a conscious, deliberate rejection of the show by a massive number of people. So how in the world does a halftime show manage to split an audience so intensely? Well, according to the source material we're looking at, the whole thing centered on the performance by the global music artist Bad Bunny. Now, the source argues that this negative reaction wasn't just random, It wasn't just people saying, I don't like the music. The claim is that it was rooted in two very specific issues that supposedly drove millions of viewers away. And this really gets to the heart of the source's argument. It poses this central question, basically framing the choice of performer as a move by the NFL that was meant to be provocative. So the source boils the backlash down into these two distinct categories. The argument is that it wasn't just about musical taste. It was about a language barrier and what was seen as some very direct political messaging. All right, so the first big point of contention, according to the source, was the language. The performer chose to sing almost entirely in Spanish, which allegedly created an immediate wall, a real disconnect with a large part of the American audience. This quote is what the source uses to capture that feeling of alienation. The argument being made is that for a huge American event like the Super Bowl, the language choice felt, to some viewers, intentionally exclusionary. Okay, but it went beyond language. The source argues that the performer's perceived political stance was a huge driver of the controversy. This, according to the commentary, is where things went from just being about personal preference to an actual protest. To really build its case, the source defines the artist in these very specific terms. He's not just presented as musician, but as a figurehead for a particular political and cultural point of view. Then, the source lists these specific political points, from who he endorses for president to his views on immigration, as proof for its claim. The argument is that this was a provocative choice, and the NFL had to have known what kind of message his selection would send. So with all this backlash brewing, the source explains that something else happened. A competing event popped up online, and it was positioned as a direct cultural counter-program. And you can see here, the source draws a really sharp night and day contrast. It compares the NFL's show to the Turning Point USA alternative on every single level, from the artists and the message right down to the whole focus of the production. The source claims this alternative show was designed to be an explicitly patriotic counterpoint. I mean, it was meant to offer a completely opposite vision to what the source was framing as a divisive NFL performance. So, did any of this actually make a difference? Well, this brings us to the impact and the numbers that the source claims. The idea here is that this wasn't just some culture clash. It was a real-time fight for eyeballs that the NFL was losing. And the video makes a really bold claim here, that over 20 million people tuned in to the alternative broadcast. It presents this as a staggering number for an online stream running opposite the Super Bowl. And to really emphasize the scale, the source highlights a peak of 10 million people watching at the same time across different platforms. This suggests a massive coordinated tune-out from the main event. The source uses these numbers to argue that the NFL was facing a catastrophic loss of its captive audience. For a broadcaster, having viewers literally change the channel during the Super Bowl, well, that's presented as the ultimate failure. But the source argues these viewership numbers aren't just about one halftime show. They're presented as a symptom of a much, much larger political and cultural conflict happening in America. And this is the harsh verdict the video's commentary finally lands on. It frames the NFL's programming choices as a direct insult to a core part of its traditional fan base. And the source doesn't stop at just the halftime show. It connects the performance to all these broader political debates on immigration, the economy, you name it, suggesting it represents an ideology that a lot of viewers actively oppose. And that is the final, pretty provocative question the source leaves us with. Was this whole thing a mistake, or was it a deliberate choice by the league to offend as many people as possible? It really makes you wonder, in today's media world, is controversy not even a risk anymore, but part of the actual business plan?